Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Red pill me on gnomes.
Just as visible nature is populated by an infinite number of living creatures, so according to Paracelsus, the invisible spiritual counterpart of visible nature, composed of the tenuous principles of the visible elements, is inhabited by a host of peculiar beings, to whom he has given the name elementals, and which have later been termed the nature spirits. Paracelsus divided these people of the elements into 4 distinct groups, which he called gnomes, undines, sylphs, and salamanders. He taught that they were really living entities, many resembling human beings in shape, and inhabiting worlds of their own, unknown to man because his undeveloped senses were incapable of functioning beyond the limitations of the grosser elements. The elementals who dwell in that attenuated body of the earth which is called the terreous ether are grouped together under the general heading of gnomes. The name is probably derived from the Greek genomus, meaning earth dweller. See New English Dictionary. Just as there are many types of human beings evolving through the objective physical elements of nature, so there are many types of gnomes evolving through the subjective ethereal body of nature. These earth spirits work in an element so close in vibratory rate to the material earth that they have immense power over its rocks and flora, and also over the mineral elements in the animal and human kingdoms. Some, like the pygmies, work with the stones, gems, and metals, and are supposed to be the guardians of hidden treasures. They live in caves far down in what the Scandinavians called the land of the Nibelungen. In Wagner's wonderful opera cycle, The Ring of the Nibelungen, Alberic makes himself king of the pygmies and forces these little creatures to gather for him the treasures concealed beneath the surface of the earth. Besides the pygmies, there are other gnomes, who are called tree and forest sprites. To this group belong the sylvestres, satyrs, pans, dryads, hamadryads, durdalis, elves, brownies, and little old men of the woods. Paracelsus states that the gnomes build houses of substances resembling in their constituencies alabaster, marble, and cement, but the true nature of these materials is unknown, having no counterpart in physical nature. Some families of gnomes gather in communities, while others are indigenous to the substances with and in which they work. For example, the hamadryads live and die with the plants or trees of which they are a part. Every shrub and flower is said to have its own nature spirit, which often uses the physical body of the plant as its habitation. The ancient philosophers, recognizing the principle of intelligence manifesting itself in every department of nature alike, believed that the quality of natural selection exhibited by creatures not possessing organized mentalities expressed in reality the decisions of the nature spirits themselves. C.M. Gailey in the classic Myths says, "It was a pleasing trait in the old paganism that it loved to trace in every operation of nature the agency of deity. The imagination of the Greeks peopled the regions of earth and sea with divinities, to whose agency it attributed the phenomena that our philosophy ascribes to the operation of natural law. Thus, in behalf of the plant it worked with, the elemental accepted and rejected food elements, deposited coloring matter therein, preserved and protected the seed, and performed many other beneficent offices. Each species was served by a different but appropriate type of nature spirit. Those working with poisonous shrubs, for example, were offensive in their appearance. It is said the nature spirits of poison hemlock resemble closely tiny human skeletons, thinly covered with a semi-transparent flesh. They live in and through the hemlock, and if it be cut down, remain with the broken shoots until both die. But while there is the slightest evidence of life in the shrub, it shows the presence of the elemental guardian. Great trees also have their nature spirits, but these are much larger than the elementals of smaller plants. The labors of the pygmies include the cutting of the crystals in the rocks and the development of veins of ore. When the gnomes are laboring with animals or human beings, their work is confined to the tissues corresponding with their own natures. Hence they work with the bones, which belong to the mineral kingdom, and the ancients believed the reconstruction of broken members to be impossible without the cooperation of the elementals. The gnomes are of various sizes, most of them much smaller than human beings, though some of them have the power of changing their stature at will. This is the result of the extreme mobility of the element in which they function. Concerning them, the Abbé de Villars wrote, "The earth is filled well nigh to its center with gnomes, people of slight stature, who are the guardians of treasures, minerals, and precious stones. They are ingenious, friends of man, and easy to govern." Not all authorities agree concerning the amiable disposition of the gnomes. Many state that they are of a tricky and malicious nature, difficult to manage, and treacherous. Writers agree, however, that when their confidence is won, they are faithful and true. The philosophers and initiates of the ancient world were instructed concerning these mysterious little people and were taught how to communicate with them and gain their cooperation in undertakings of importance. The Magi were always warned, however, never to betray the trust of the elementals, for if they did, the invisible creatures, working through the subjective nature of man, could cause them endless sorrow and probably ultimate destruction. So long as the mystic served others, the gnomes would serve him. But if he sought to use their aid selfishly to gain temporal power, they would turn upon him with unrelenting fury. The same was true if he sought to deceive them. The earth spirits meet at certain times of the year in great conclaves, as Shakespeare suggests in his Midsummer Night's Dream, where the elementals all gather to rejoice in the beauty and harmony of nature and the prospects of an excellent harvest. The gnomes are ruled over by a king, whom they greatly love and revere. His name is Gob. Hence his subjects are often called goblins. Medieval mystics gave a corner of creation, one of the cardinal points, to each of the four kingdoms of nature spirits, and because of their earthy character, the gnomes were assigned to the north, the place recognized by the ancients as the source of darkness and death. One of the four main divisions of human disposition was also assigned to the gnomes, and because so many of them dwelt in the darkness of caves and the gloom of forests, their temperament was said to be melancholy, gloomy, and despondent. By this, it is not meant that they themselves are of such disposition, but rather that they have special control over elements of similar consistency. The gnomes marry and have families, and the female gnomes are called gnomides. Some wear clothing woven of the element in which they live. In other instances, their garments are part of themselves and grow with them, like the fur of animals. The gnomes are said to have insatiable appetites and to spend a great part of the rime eating, but they earn their food by diligent and conscientious labor. Most of them are of a miserly temperament, fond of storing things away in secret places. There is abundant evidence of the fact that small children often see the gnomes, inasmuch as their contact with the material side of nature is not yet complete, and they still function more or less consciously in the invisible worlds. The type of gnome most frequently seen is the brownie or elf, a mischievous and grotesque little creature from 12 to 18 inches high, usually dressed in green or russet brown. Most of them appear as very aged, often with long white beards, and their figures are inclined to rotundity. They can be seen scampering out of holes in the stumps of trees, and sometimes they vanish by actually dissolving into the tree itself. According to Paracelsus, man lives in the exterior elements, and the elementals live in the interior elements. The latter have dwellings and clothing, manners and customs, languages and governments of their own, in the same sense as the bees have their queens and herds of animals their leaders. Philosophia Occulta, translated by Franz Hartmann. Paracelsus differs somewhat from the Greek mystics concerning the environmental limitations imposed on the nature spirits. The Swiss philosopher constitutes them of subtle invisible ethers. According to this hypothesis, they would be visible only at certain times, and only to those en rapport with their ethereal vibrations. The Greeks, on the other hand, apparently believed that many nature spirits had material constitutions capable of functioning in the physical world. Often the recollection of a dream is so vivid that upon awakening, a person actually believes that he has passed through a physical experience. The difficulty of accurately judging as to the end of physical sight and the beginning of ethereal vision may account for these differences of opinion. Even this explanation, however, does not satisfactorily account for the satyr which, according to Saint Jerome, was captured alive during the reign of Constantine and exhibited to the people. It was of human form with the horns and feet of a goat. After its death, it was preserved in salt and taken to the emperor that he might testify to its reality. It is within the bounds of probability that this curiosity was what modern science knows as a monstrosity. The Secret Teachings of All Ages, Manly P. Hall.
Had a gnome figurine in my room. I lost something and kept looking for it the entire day. I found it neatly placed on top of the table the very next day. Did the gnomes mess with me through the figurine? Yeah, probably.
Can someone draw me a gnome helping me with a bunch of paperwork and bills while I sit amongst piles of them?
Behold the gnome helper.
Gnome bullying? Hi, so I'm a bit worried that my garden gnome is facing some issues. I've just kinda had a vibe recently that he's been very stressed out. I usually don't go for the gnome bacon meme like a pleb, as I know from experience that he prefers Parmesan and root beer. But truth be told, I went for it out of desperation. Predictably, he didn't like it at all from what I can tell. But that aside, he hasn't really done much of anything recently, including not liking those favorite snacks of his. Not sure why I thought the bacon would fix it, but yeah. I've done some research and frankly my offerings of beets, kale, turnips, and sunchokes haven't amounted to anything. Should I try mushrooms? For the record, I haven't made any massive changes to the garden, or any at all really aside from keeping things tidy, so I don't get this sudden shift in behavior. Are there any plants or flowers that my gnome might like? Like, do they like change and new additions? Anyway, the point is I've noticed some of the neighborly gnomes giving me bad vibes. Not like hostile towards me, but towards my gnome. I've encountered them in some weird positions, sometimes definitely hanging out faced away from my gnome. That's why I'm worried that my gnome might be ostracized in some way or bullied by the other ones. Can I do something to help him, or is that best left alone?
To cheer him up, I'd recommend some cookies. Keebler Elves cookies usually work fine enough. Just don't tell him that elves made it. If he's depressed or something, consider introducing him to a cute gnome girl. He might just be lonely.
You should try. 1. Blueberries. 2. Baked goods. Perhaps muffins to name one example. 3. A cheap smartphone with no SIM card, not tied to an account, that can take pictures and video. Make sure to wipe it properly, no personal info. 4. A DVD copy of the Stargate, 1994 movie. I'm unaware if it needs to be an official copy or if a burned disc will do. 5. A throw pillow with a geometric design on the fabric. 6. A tiny, sized for a gnome, hammer or mallet. Bonus points if it's made entirely out of stone. 7. Butter, bird, certain species eggs, or loaves of bread.
Please elaborate.
There was an OP here who believed gnomes took his smartphone. When he got it back, it looked like they took pictures and possibly video.
I swear I've seen this exact gnome before. Couple days ago, I was strolling home when I noticed 2 perfectly new tires laying on the sidewalk. Still had the factory labels on them and everything. I grabbed them, and there was this garden gnome in front of the house. It felt like it was staring into my soul as I took the tires. It looked identical to the one in OP's pic. Real, freaky shit. Anyway, I took the pair of tires and sold them to my buddy Pablo, who works at some Mexican tire shop for $90. Used that to buy some DMT. Do you live in the Jacksonville area by any chance?
Reverse image search. No results. Did OP really just take a pic of his garden gnome and censor out the eyes?
I recently experienced something truly extraordinary, and I don't know anywhere else to share this. While I was hiking in a remote woodland area when I hear this weird rustling and whispering in the underbrush. I figure it's just some small critters or something, but then I see them. Gnomes. I had stumbled upon an event that I can only describe as a confrontation between 2 distinct factions of gnomes, the stone gnomes and the soil gnomes. I want to stress that what I witnessed was surreal, but entirely believable in the context of the paranormal. These gnomes were unlike anything I had ever imagined. The stone gnomes appeared to be made of solid rock, with weathered, rugged features. The soil gnomes, on the other hand, seemed to be composed of earth and dirt, blending seamlessly with their environment. Both groups were clearly wearing pointed hats that most modern folks would immediately associate with the image of a garden gnome. At first, I thought I was merely observing a chance gathering of these elusive creatures. However, it quickly became apparent that this was no chance encounter. Both groups were positioned on opposite sides of a natural boundary, a line that separated rocky terrain from fertile soil. It was as if they each claimed dominion over their respective territories. Without any prior knowledge of gnome behavior, I could only speculate about their motives, but it had the appearance and feel of a literal turf war between two gangs of gnomes. The stone gnomes held tiny slingshots made from twigs and had bundles of pebbles at their waists, while the soil gnomes carried oversized trowels and rakes that also appeared to be fashioned from twigs and larger pieces of wood. Pick unrelated. The confrontation escalated as the stone gnomes launched pebbles toward the soil gnomes, who began constructing little trenches in the loose dirt like it was World War Gnome. They piled up the displaced dirt into barriers in front of their trenches with remarkable precision, and the stone gnomes muttered to themselves in frustration as their projectiles hit the dirt wall ineffectively. The atmosphere was tense, and I could sense a deep-seated rivalry between these two groups. I must admit that I watched this spectacle in awe and disbelief. It was clear that these gnomes were engaged in a territorial dispute, a battle over their natural domains. The experience left me with numerous unanswered questions, and I cannot help but wonder about the existence of these beings and their role in the natural world. I am eager to hear if anyone else has encountered similar phenomena or possesses any knowledge about the folklore or legends surrounding gnomes and their territorial conflicts. Is it normal for gnomes to form factions and to go to war with each other? Your insights and perspectives would be greatly appreciated.
I couldn't believe it when I read your post about the skirmish between the stone gnomes and soil gnomes. It's fascinating how these little creatures seem to have their own complex societies and territorial rivalries. Well, let me share my own gnome encounter, which was equally mind-boggling. A few months ago, I was camping near a serene, secluded pond in the forest. It was a tranquil spot, with tall trees surrounding the water's edge. As I was enjoying the peaceful ambience, I noticed some movement near the pond, and that's when I saw them, water gnomes and tree gnomes. The water gnomes had a distinct aquatic appearance, with shimmering, translucent skin that seemed to blend seamlessly with the water. They had tiny fishing rods made from twigs and spider silk, and their fishing techniques were nothing short of amazing. They were catching the tiniest of fish with incredible precision. On the other side of the pond, the tree gnomes perched on branches and appeared to be part of the trees themselves. Their twiggy limbs mimicked the branches around them, and they held tiny bows made from reeds and leaves. It was as if they were guardians of the forest, protecting the trees from any potential harm. At first, I thought this was just a peaceful coexistence between the two factions, but I soon realized there was tension in the air. The water gnomes were casting their lines dangerously close to the tree branches where the tree gnomes resided. This intrusion into their territory didn't sit well with the tree gnomes, and they responded by sending gusts of wind that rustled the leaves and created ripples in the water. The standoff escalated, with the water gnomes using their fishing lines to try and snatch leaves from the trees, and the tree gnomes shaking the branches to create waves. It was like watching an elemental battle between water and earth. I couldn't stay to witness how it all ended, as darkness was setting in, but the encounter left me with a deep sense of wonder and a ton of questions. Do these gnomes have their own unique domains and responsibilities in the natural world? How do they coexist, or do they in fact engage in territorial disputes like the stone and soil gnomes you encountered?
Gnome fuckery. Hey guys, I'm looking for some knowledge and support here as gnomes are preying on me and my family. I've had minor disturbances in the past with gnomes, usually them moving about a foot from where I left them or tipping over unusually. Wide and strong bases on all of them, this shouldn't happen. Today it was a lot worse. A gnome showed up on my back porch despite not being anywhere near there. Family denies moving it and they were all busy. Parents were working. Grandmother did not leave the house because of the snow. This, of course, freaked me out a bit, but I tried not to think much of it. A few hours ago they cut the power to my house. I don't know how or why, but they seem to have me in their sights. I was taking lasagna out of the oven when they cut it and I almost dropped the thing. Then I swear I saw a gnome in the window. I've been seeing them off and on in my vision, always briefly, and when it's dark for maybe as long as a few months. Just very sparingly, but it seems like they're showing up more and more. 40 minutes ago I heard banging upstairs again, which I know is them. I don't think they want me to sleep. Why me? What can or should I do? I don't want to piss them off, but I really don't want to deal with this. Would really appreciate help here.
You need to pick up any trash that you may have left in your yard or clean up anything that might be damaging to the wildlife. Plant life you have outside your house. Baking cookies also helps.
I'm no expert, but you can either rectify your mistakes, appease them, or scare them off. 1. Clean up like another anon said. Be mindful of your impact on nature around your yard, plant some seeds, and feed the wildlife. Tell them you're sorry if you've caused any harm. 2. Leave out a bowl of milk or some fresh food for them. State that it's for them and that you would like peace and friendship. 3. The Fae fear cold iron. That means you can put caltrops and nails around your house's exterior, carry a knife, etc. Bad idea if you live with others who might step on them. You can also try banishing them via spiritual means. LBRP, LBRH, burning sage, etc. Diamaticius, I can't spell that shit. Earth is good for forming barriers to keep small critters and bugs away since it cuts micro-fissures into skin and lungs, so it could work on them as physical creatures. Salt circles could work against them as spiritual ones. Do your own research ultimately, and do not give in to fear, paranoia, as they may feed off of and grow more persistent and amused by it.
You got some fucking corner gnomes, Anon. Piss in every corner of your house, even the ceilings, anywhere two planes meet. That'll discourage them.
This first story is from my father. During one particular summer, my father, who had been toiling out in the yard, had decided to come inside to get away from the heat and take a little break. He said he went into his bedroom and laid down on the mattress on his back, looking up at the ceiling. After some time, just enjoying the silence and the warm buzz of the empty room, he heard the sound of paper rustling softly to his side. Thinking perhaps it was a mouse, he turned his head very slowly, careful not to scare it away, and was startled to see a small humanoid figure rummaging through some newspaper that was near my parents' dresser. He said it was a little person, and that it was dressed in dark brown rags. My father recalled watching it for a few seconds in disbelief, and that was when the figure stopped dead in its tracks, as if it suddenly realized that it had been noticed. At that moment, he said it turned quickly and walked through the wall, vanishing. As soon as it disappeared, he jumped up off the bed to search the spot the figure had just occupied, even feeling at the wall where it had gone through. But there was nothing there. If you've ever seen the film Cat's Eye, based off of a collection of Stephen King stories, my father claims that the little person he saw closely resembled the little creature that was living in the little girl's room. I'm in my mid-30s, and to this day he still stands by what he saw. My second story, to piggyback off the first one, also took place when I was a child. This is a story within a story. My family owns the property in southeastern Maine we mainly use for hunting. It's on the edge of the town where I grew up, and apart from the acre we've cleared out to feed deer, the rest is all thick brush. When I was little, my father bought the property from another family, and once, while they were negotiating prices, etc., he heard a strange story from the buyer's grandfather. Now the old man had grown up in the area and used to love talking about his boyhood adventures on the property. All innocent stories, except one time the old man related a strange incident that happened to him one early morning when he was very small. A large creek used to run through the property. Today it's nothing more than a dried-out ravine, but when the old man was a child it was full and had fish in it. The old man said that one early morning he had come out to the property to do some fishing. As he approached the creek, he was startled to hear hushed voices. Creeping quietly to see who it might be, he said he found himself looking at two small people standing by the water's edge. The figures appeared to be no bigger than a foot, and were dressed in dark green and brown clothing. The voices that he had heard belonged to these two people, and although he couldn't tell what they were talking about, he remembered feeling that it was something serious. Then he remembers that one of them whistled like a bird, and to his astonishment a whole group of these beings clambered out of a dead nearby fallen tree. The old man said he watched as they gathered and walked in file down the bank, disappearing where the creek bent and went in another direction. Of course, when he got up to find them, there was no trace of them. The old man told my father that he had tried going early again several times hoping to see them again, but he never did.
How can I attract a gnome to my house? I've heard they are more of a European folk, but I live in America. I really desperately want a gnome around my house. Is there a way to attract or summon them? They aren't dangerous, are they? I think I would like to have a friendship with one. Help me get my gnome.
Build gnome houses and they will come. They also have a penchant for turnips and fresh strawberries. Leave some out near or in the gnome houses. Don't let them rot though. They will not like that. If a fairy circle grows near your gnome houses, this is a good sign. Note that if only the strawberries are eaten and not the turnips, and there is also a present fairy circle, then you're probably attracting just fae instead. Which isn't inherently bad, but too many of them will mean the gnomes are unlikely to move in.
What are gnome houses like?
Like literally make them little houses. No silver or ash. Adding a door to a nook in a tree, a little burrow you create with sticks, dirt, whatever. The more natural materials, the better. So you can try those little hobbyist garden decorations, but if they're made of plastics, etc., it may be unwelcoming. It's more symbolic than anything, because they build their own dens, usually in burrows underground, but it shows your respect, intent, or offering of sharing your space with them.
There's probably multiple types of gnomes that have different tastes, so you might be in for some trial or error. But once they're there, if they don't like something, they'll let you know really fucking fast. Finding dead animals in your yard means something is very wrong, and I'd be concerned as F, for example. If you haven't confirmed it's a gnome buddy, it could also mean something unwanted took up residence instead. Once you have a gnome buddy, they'll help prevent other things from taking up residence. They're very territorial.
Any idea how gnomes fare in North America? Did the Pilgrims bring them over?
Gnomes existed in America prior to European colonization. Native Americans had myths of little people for centuries. As for how they got there, I don't know, probably the same way they got everywhere else. Pretty much every culture on the planet has myths of little people.
Many gnomes arrived in America with the Vikings. Gnomes that traveled with natives across the Bering Strait are now living among skinwalkers and others under various mountain ranges. They prefer areas that remind them of their Euro homes. Mushrooms are good. Hang hunted deer in your trees and dry the meat. Gnomes are attracted to the smell of the hunt.
I don't know how they came to be here, but I know they do live in North America. Canadian myself and have experienced them, though not on my own property. I honestly think they're some kind of fae, though not the same as the fae, and they can help keep harmful trickster fae away. That said, their idea of humor or pranks reminds me a lot of the fae. Like stuff that seems kind of WTF from a human perspective but isn't actually malicious on their end. The last poster is right on the mushrooms, etc. They're associated with gardens a lot for good reason.
My grandma had some on her farm when I was growing up, and they always made me feel uncomfortable, like I was being watched or preyed on. I don't recall them ever doing anything to me, but I don't think they like children. At least those ones didn't. They liked the fish pond and the beetroot garden. Same with this lil fake wooden well thing. Didn't like the crab apple trees for some reason and stuck to the underbrush tree line a lot. I developed a fear of dolls because of those little fuckers. Thinking back makes my stomach sink. I really think it was just because I was a kid. I remember too they showed me a dead gopher with these weird blue worms in it and kept giggling and telling me to touch it. I was really little and had that gut feeling I shouldn't do it.
This also reminds me of the fae, the weirdness with children. I don't think it's maliciousness so much as their culture is different. The weird dead animal laughing thing is very much the kind of stuff, I mean, when I say their humor can be kind of crude or seen weirdly from a human perspective, but isn't actually meant maliciously. Overall, if you respect them, they should respect you and offer a mutually beneficial relationship.
Well, it's a little harder to attract gnomes in America. There's probably about 1 for every 5 there'd be in Europe, but they are more nomadic and may stop and settle for parts of the year, some permanently. They like peace and tranquility. If you pull up in the driveway blasting Slayer at 3 a.m., they might not be too thrilled. The only noise they really like is the sound of nature, and so the more of that you get going on, the better. That means keeping your garden together to attract birds and deer. The more rare birds and insects and native plants you get, the more likely you're going to attract something as rare as gnomes. And the other guys are right about building spaces for them to want to come. I'm not sure what would happen if they made themselves at home inside of your house, though. It's something I was told to watch out for, but wasn't explained why.
This 10,000%. I'm not sure on the logic behind it either, but I know they generally become malicious or malevolent towards you if they share a house. Like little pranks or things that grow increasingly more dangerous. I don't know if this is their fey-like trickster nature or territorial nests seeping through, but never, ever, ever invite them to live in your actual house. The way I see it is you should treat them like wild animals. You can cohabitate in an area together and it is good for you both, but you still don't go up and pet a coyote or let it come inside. They are much more intelligent than a wild animal, but that also makes them very frightening in the wrong circumstances, and there's no reason to provoke it.
If you go through with the idea, make sure your property is out in a woods or at least several acres. Be mindful of neighbors. If my next-door neighbor invited gnomes on his property, I would have to kill the whole family and war with the gnomes until they fucked off. Be mindful of neighbors, OP. Be mindful. Know the true nature of the gnome before they come for you.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.